The robot drone arms race in Ukraine has reached a fever pitch. Just how are both sides constantly trying to one up each other and produce cheap but unbelievably powerful weapon systems that are changing the battlefield literally month by month? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's crack into it. Okay, so the sort of framework to talk about this is an article from The Economist saying, can interceptor drones stop Russia's terror bombing? But this is actually the least interesting headline, because we've been talking for a while about the fact that Russia favors its deep strike, its strategic strike drones, namely the Garans and the Gerberas. Sorry. So the Russian armed forces have been relying on their clones of the Iranian Shaheds called the Garans. These are, of course, about 1,000-pound, maybe not even that, deep strike drones capable of flying hundreds of kilometers and carrying a 90-pound warhead that slams into Ukrainian targets. But you say, Paul, they've been using Shaheds or Garans since the start of the war. What do you mean about this incredible iterative process? Well, the answer is, first off, the Russians have scaled up their production of the Garans, increasing nearly fivefold from the same time last year. So in May, they think the Russians are going to be churning out about 2,700 Garans and about 2,500 Gerberas. Gerberas are smaller and often used as a decoy drone, but not always. And these are produced, again, at two factories far from the front lines, that Ukrainians have been able to hit with their own drone strikes, but not severely enough to really dent their output. And what's been kind of surreal is that the Ukrainians actually, for a large portion of the war, have been very effective at stopping these old school Iranian Shaheds, right? They have been able to only about 3% of these deep strike Russian drones historically have been able to get through. But that number is changing. And that is a function, here we go, of the fact that, again, until March of this year, only about 3 to 5% of the Garans were getting through, which means that Russia, in order to achieve a single Garan to hit its target, it would have to send literally up to 30 Garans to nail a single Ukrainian target. This is making its cost tremendous. But last month, that number rose to 15%. And part of that is because of the U.S.'s unwillingness to provide Patriot and other air defense batteries to Ukrainian forces. But the other reality is that Russia, and with help from China, has improved both the quantity and quality of the drones, right? So the waves of each drone, as you can see from the chart here, are simply increasing dramatically, with Russia experiencing an exponential increase in the size of each attack. Meaning that, let's say Russia sent, typically a wave would be about 100 Garans, and Ukrainian air defenses would be able to manage that, allowing only one or two or three to penetrate. Now, when you're talking about a wave of 500 or up to 1,000, it's overwhelming to Ukrainian air defenses. And once you've overwhelmed the air defenses, it's every subsequent strike is going to penetrate. So you can see that here with this exponential growth of the Garans, and you can see there's also been an exponential growth of penetrance of the number that penetrate through those air defenses. The other thing, though, is that Russia has not just rested on their laurels. Despite the fact that these are getting cheaper to manufacture, they are also getting better. In fact, Russia has equipped its latest Garans with a video guidance system rumored to actually be powered by Starlink terminals, where they remain connected to an operator that's observing via a video camera, allowing them to be guided along an unpredictable flight path. They also have AI that can take over the flying of the drone in an unpredictable way if they are somehow jammed. Counter electronic warfare systems and reportedly a vast increase in its altitude, flying at 4,000 meters, and an increase in speed up to 400 kilometers per hour. So rivaling that of commercial aircraft. So it used to be a slow, easy to detect drone on a consistent flight path is now a highly maneuverable, highly fast, high flying drone, right? With new payloads nearly more than doubling from the original 50-kilogram warhead of the old school, again, Shahed. And I want to point out right away, already, you hear me referring to things as the old school Shahed. The old school Shahed was, of course, the Iranian variant that didn't have any of these additional weapon systems that had a propeller driven. But the fact that I'm calling it old school and I'm referring to a design from 24 months ago should tell you already about just how insanely fast this iterative process has become. And you can see that the Russians, again, are keeping cost extremely low, just $200,000 for an upgraded Garand 2. So what's the problem? Well, the answer is that Ukraine has to find ways to solve their own problem. And the answer for them is to say, listen, we need to find an even cheaper interceptor drone. And there's a bunch of Ukrainian firms that have been rolling this out. Notably, in fact, one of my contacts in Ukraine actually is working for a drone unit that is interdicting Garands, and sent me a video recently of one of their quadcopter drones taking out one of the Gerberas. And it was really interesting to see the fact that they were using a $500 drone to take out a $200,000 drone. And I want to give you guys some context here, because the U.S., their version of a strategic strike weapon, the Tomahawk missile. By the way, this is something that was designed decades ago. This was a cruise missile that was used, I'm going to say, in the Gulf War, right? So easy 30-year-old technology. Still costs the United States $2 million per unit. For those of you keeping track at home, they can afford 10 of these advanced Garands with the AI, the video monitor, the jamming system for the cost of a single Tomahawk missile. Now, admittedly, the Tomahawk's a little faster, right? But in terms of what it's used for, right, the Tomahawk is our cheapest strike package that we can use to simply throw at, say, a Houthi missile launch station or a Houthi base, someone who's not going to have any kind of meaningful air defenses. And that alone should tell you that the move is not just towards better, it's towards cheaper. And the Ukrainians need to make their interceptors cheaper even still. And so they are working tirelessly to do so. In fact, here is video from one of the Wild Hornets unit. I want you just to show you one of the interceptors they're pioneering. And you can see it here. It is fast, but it has a problem. Remember, these things have to fly. They have to be able to be maneuverable enough to chase down a Shahed or a Garand, and they have to be able to be precise enough to actually slam right into it, because close doesn't count when it comes to air interdictions. But they also need a flight altitude that can get them to the height these things are flying. And it needs to have the battery, again, to chase it down and still be able to maneuver its way to get that kill. So you can see here, right, it's taken off. It's a blend between a quadcopter and a fixed wing aircraft, right? So it seems to travel, again, relying on both like a quadcopter, but with a fixed nose. It seems like a really interesting design. And you can see it blends both the altitude, the maneuverability, and the speed. And reportedly, the Ukrainians say these new designs are actually able to interdict up to 70% of the Russian Garands. And these, right, according to at least the Ukrainian requirements, they say, listen, each interceptors cannot exceed $5,000 in cost. Again, 1/20th of a Garand. They need to be able to zip around at least 300 kilometers an hour and must fly and loiter at altitudes up to 5 kilometers, right? And of course, they have to hit the Garand and explode on impact. And this is a huge challenge, right? But that's not the actual story. The story isn't that drones are getting better, right? Because we've talked before, right? Here's, for example, the U.S. company Anduril's answer to these. It's their own air defense interceptor. Guys, this is training video. YouTube, please don't demonetize me. But you can see here, the idea is the same. They need it to be fixed wing. They need it to be able to return. They need to be able to independently maneuver, find, and track and finish its targets. That means it needs to talk continually to radar systems. But again, the takeaway is not that these things are out there. The takeaway is something different entirely. But before we talk about that, I wanted to point out two things. The first is that sometimes for the Ukrainians, the defense against these isn't just the next level of advanced robotics or AI. It's also some old school stuff, right? And in this case, the latest has actually been red dot sight kilometers. And this is a video from the Ukrainians. I wanted to take a look at. This is one of the Ukrainian units that we've partnered with that you guys have helped fundraise for. Actually, I don't think I can show this because it's a firearm. YouTube is going to demonetize me. But the point is that we are raising funds to help the Ukrainian units fight off another advanced type of Russian drone, the fiber optic FPV. You can see here, we are actually so close to our fundraiser because, well, the need is pretty great. And this is basically our goal is to get the Ukrainian units the defensive tools they need to protect themselves from Russian fiber optic drones. Fiber optic drones cannot be jammed. And so the best defense, right, is for the Ukrainians to actually be able to locate the launch points of these Russian drones. So we're helping them with some long range fiber optic reconnaissance drones. We're improving their mobility with ATVs so that they can stay in covered and concealed positions, zipping through wood lines much faster and less likely to be detected. And of course, lots and lots of camouflage nets, right? This, as you can literally see from the picture, these nets tend to tangle up the drones before they can strike their targets. So, of course, the units, the 59th has pledged to hook anyone that donates $250 up with a patch, with more patches for more donors. A huge thank you to Carson, who says, "Happy birthday to my brother. He's awesome. This is what he wanted for his gift." That's pretty badass. Benjamin, right, dropping $10. Again, not making his coffee at home and pledging the rest to help Ukraine. Titus, truly a badass name perhaps named after the Space Marine. $30. Thanks to all you guys that donate. Right, the link, of course, is going to be in the description. Now, here's the takeaway that I want you guys to really get from this. There's a real story here that I think is more important. And that answer is tucked here at the bottom of the article, almost as a throwaway. When talking, this is a conversation with one of the Ukrainian technology startups who talks about the fact that the future drones are going to need, the interceptors need to integrate with existing radar networks. They're going to need advanced AI to be autonomous and resistant to jamming. And he said, listen, I expect there to be an adaptation rates, with each side upgrading their software in 15 to 20-day innovation cycles, right? He says at some point, Russians may even have drones that can talk with each other to get around or to overwhelm specific defensive points. And they say, listen, interceptor drones are not a silver bullet. They're going to need to be part of a large system that includes things like Ukraine's Sky Sentinel, here an automated turret system that can automatically detect and shoot down incoming drones. You also have Rheinmetall, the German defense manufacturer, producing their own version that, again, links to radar, automatically calculates the drone's location and trajectory, and fires some long-range bullets at them. This is a huge, this is part of this innovation cycle that we talk about. And the future, right? Here's, again, an example of Ukraine launching or having a jet-propelled stealth attack drone that's been seen only twice since 2024. No one even knows if this thing is actually being fielded yet. We also have video, for example, from Eyes on Ukraine, who sent us this from the 25th, showing literally, this is an FPV drone lying in wait, a UGV Ukrainian ground drone that literally is zipping along, but then it's being watched by a Mavic. The FPV drone attacks it, and you can see that the ground drone actually is able to maneuver out of the way of the FPV drone. All of this to say, what we're seeing more and more is this cycle, The cycle is the innovation. That's the takeaway that I think Western militaries, the U.S. military is completely blind to. The innovation is not in the actual drones themselves. I mean, they are the innovation, right? But look, you get a new iPhone every year. Apple isn't great because it makes the iPhone 13, right? Apple is great because it continually pushes the envelope of what it can do. Apple isn't a company that innovates things. That is what they earn their living doing. And that's what militaries have to start realizing, is that they are not in the business of necessarily building weapons. They're in the business of innovating in the battlefield space. And the Ukrainians and Russians have become very good at this, right? They have learned how to learn. Like a kid who, realizes that studying actually works, right? And by the time they're in college, they have a whole bunch of study techniques that they go, this is how I learn best. That's how militaries have to operate. And that's how Ukraine has been operating, where they are saying, listen, we know how to try a bunch of new things. We know how to go from idea to prototype to scaled production to battlefield testing to full scale implementation. And this is not something that they stumbled into, right? The Ukrainians, it's important that there was nothing in the Ukrainian military in, say, 2014 that would allow them to do this. They had a Soviet-style bureaucracy. They had an extremely rigid view of doctrine and tactics. And the reality is that the battlefield has forced them at tremendous personal cost to become these innovators and to build these pockets where continual innovation can happen. And the reality is, as we've talked about, when you're talking about 15 to 20 day cycles to implement new hardware, new software, what you are going to have to do is build a system that can build crazy things, that can iterate faster than anyone ever thought possible. And that is going to be what the future of war is, right? And so the future of war is becoming less predictable because each arms race is going to be specific, right? A lot of these technologies, right? High level reconnaissance drones, for example, these are somewhat unique to Ukraine because if you were fighting in, say, the jungles of Thailand and Cambodia, the foliage that's kind of around the clock is going to provide you with cover and concealment. You may need to innovate ways to see or detect. You may also develop drones that simply operate differently, that maybe crawl on the ground or that are more passive. Or that rely on thermal sights or even improved detection with EM signatures. And so imagine a future global conflict, right? A future conflict where you have a set of companies that do nothing but innovate drones, innovate technology within a certain battle space. They say, listen, we are experts at doing this in littoral coastal areas. And they say, we build the drones and we're in an arms race. And they might even sit there and go, I can tell you the company, right? Let's say a conflict over Taiwan, hypothetical, right? There might be an American company or a Taiwanese company or European company that says, listen, we wake up every day. We have a team of AI engineers. They're as enabled as we can get them. We have access to all these technology logistics, and they wake up every day and they are in competition with one company in China. We know their names. We know who works there. And that Chinese company is responsible for building drones that fight on beaches and littoral areas. And they've innovated ways to keep sand out of it. They've hardened their systems against salt water. They don't need to worry as much about cover and concealment because it's an open beach, right? And so those two guys are going to have to work at each other. But two buildings down, there's going to be another lab that sits there and goes, well, we're fighting in the desert or the mountains. And we are innovating our set of technologies, systems to do this. And the only way this works is if those guys in the lab know exactly, right? So they're going to sit there and go, listen, we know that the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Unit or whatever, right? Or the 1st Infantry Division, like we know who's fighting in this area. and we have a direct contact with them. So they text us. They say, yo, dude, we just saw a Chinese drone that it looks like the processor is encased against sand and water with like an epoxy or something. And that designer is going to go, dude, send me pics, mail it this way. And they are going to have to go, listen, can you, or they're going to say, hey, listen, those drones you sent us, they're fast, but they're still not as fast as the Chinese drones. You've got to get them faster. And they go, okay, well, we'll try to make them lighter weight. We'll try to find a more powerful engine, but we'll still try to harden them. And that's going to be the future. It's going to be small units fighting in small places with their own design and engineering teams, building the systems that they need that are tailored for that. Again, that's something that can only happen in sort of an AI-enabled world. And that's, again, what we're seeing, because the AI isn't just going to be in the drones. It's in the programmers. I guarantee it. The people that are doing the software, they are going to be sitting there and they're going to be told, listen, yesterday, the Russian drones, yesterday the Russian drones started to vary their altitudes, and you have 24 hours to build software that can reliably tell our interceptors to also scan the drones up and down in altitude, or that can trace them through these behaviors. It's going to be a weird, weird future, but it's coming whether we're here or not. So buckle up and get smart. Anyway, thanks to Colonel Team members of Combat Vet News like James J21, Yanko, Georgia F. Chris Gorsuch, Paul Templeton, Cytronic, Steve Moran, TR, Need Allen, and CM Holmes. All of our Lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do it without you guys. Appreciate each and every one of you guys so much, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.